My cousin falsely accused me of sexual assault. My parents gave her my $50K college fund. But, when she confessed the truth on her deathbed, I exposed everyone and left them broken. I'm 21 years old. I work for a logistics company. And basically, I'm telling this story because I need someone else to know what happened to me. Because for 3 years, I lived like I was a ghost. Like my previous life never existed. And all because of a lie someone decided to make up about me. I guess I should start at the beginning, when I still lived with my parents and thought things were going to work out. You know, that I was going to go to college, that I had a college fund waiting for me, that my family supported me. I was 18 and had just graduated high school when everything went to hell. My cousin Chelsea was 4 years older than me, so she was around 22 at that time, and she'd always been the spoiled child of the family because her dad, my uncle, was my mom's younger brother and had raised her alone after his wife left them when Chelsea was little. My uncle paid for everything for her, literally everything: college, apartment, expenses, car, and Chelsea never had to work a single day in her life. The thing is, my uncle told her he wasn't going to keep paying for everything after she reached a certain age, like it was time for her to be responsible for herself, and Chelsea didn't take it well at all. They had a huge fight about it, and she was furious, saying it was unfair, that other families supported their kids until they finished college, all those things. A few days after that fight, Chelsea came to my house. My parents weren't there. I think they'd gone out shopping or something, and she showed up crying and complaining about how unfair her dad was. I listened to her for a while, because I thought she just needed to vent. But then she started saying she didn't know how she was going to pay for college and that maybe she should ask my parents or other relatives to lend her money. And that's where I, like an idiot, told her that maybe she should look for a job, that lots of people work and study at the same time, that it wasn't the end of the world. I said something like, "Look, I'm going to have to work too when I get to college. It's not as terrible as you're making it sound." I thought I was being reasonable, you know what I mean? Giving her practical advice. Chelsea got super serious when I told her that, looked at me with a face I hadn't seen before, cold, and she left without saying much else. I thought maybe she'd gotten mad at me for not agreeing with her, but I didn't think much of it because, I figured she'd get over it. The next day, I got a call from my mom. She was at work, and her voice sounded weird, shaky and furious at the same time. She told me to come home immediately, that something very serious had happened. When I got to the house, both my parents were there, my uncle too, and Chelsea was sitting on the couch with red eyes like she'd been crying for hours. What happened next was so surreal that I still can't process it. Well, when I think about it, Chelsea accused me of sexually assaulting her the day before when she'd come to the house. She said I'd attacked her, that I'd tried to force her, this whole elaborate story with details that sounded convincing but were completely false. Literally none of that had happened. I just stood there unable to speak, in shock, because how do you respond to something like that? How do you defend something you never did? I tried to explain that she'd only been there for half an hour, that we'd talked about her dad and college, that nothing she was saying was true, but nobody was listening. My mom was crying. My dad was looking at me like I was a monster. My uncle looked devastated. Turns out Chelsea had planned everything. When she left my house that day, she'd made sure the security cameras outside captured her, leaving crying, acting as if something terrible had happened. And that was enough for my parents to believe her completely. It didn't matter that I told them the truth. It didn't matter that there was no real evidence of what she was saying. Those images of her leaving the house crying were all they needed to condemn me. And the thing is, Chelsea knew exactly what she was doing. She knew that if she accused me of something like that, my parents were going to react without thinking. They were going to want to protect and support her, and that I was going to end up as the villain no matter what I said. What happened in the following days was a nightmare. My parents didn't even want to hear my full version of events. They acted like my mere presence made them sick. My uncle looked at me with so much hatred it was scary, and Chelsea kept going with her story, adding more details each time, making it sound worse and worse. I thought maybe they were going to report me to the police, that I was going to end up in jail for something I didn't do. But turns out the family decided to handle it another way. One night, 3 days after the accusation, my parents told me there was a family meeting, that we needed to resolve what was going to happen with me. The meeting was horrible. Basically, all the adults in the family sitting in the living room deciding my fate like I was a convicted criminal. My uncle demanded that they send me away, that he didn't want me near Chelsea, that I was a danger. Some relatives suggested therapy, others talked about special programs, but in the end, my parents decided they were going to send me to my great-uncle in Iowa, a horrible guy that basically nobody in the family could stand, but who had offered to take me in. And here comes the part that still hurts. When I think about it, my parents gave my college fund to Chelsea. All the money they'd been saving for me since I was a kid, all those years of savings, they gave it to her as compensation, as if that was going to fix the trauma I supposedly caused her. They told me I didn't deserve to go to college anymore, that I was lucky they weren't reporting me to the authorities, that the least I could do was help pay for the damage I'd caused. They sent me to Iowa a week later with a suitcase of clothes and basically nothing else. My great-uncle lived in the middle of nowhere, in an old house that smelled weird, and from day one, he made it clear I wasn't welcome, that he was doing me a huge favor by letting me stay there. He had anger issues. That guy, he'd yell about anything, got mad if you left a dish in the sink or if you made noise after 8 at night. The rules were crazy. I couldn't use the house phone, I couldn't have visitors, I had to be in my room after a certain time. Basically, it was like living in a prison but without having committed any crime. My parents had told me I had to cut contact with everyone, that I couldn't talk to my old friends, that I needed to start over. And since I had no money or way to keep my phone, I basically lost all contact with my previous life. I got a job at a warehouse like 2 weeks after arriving in Iowa. It was a lifesaver, honestly, because it gave me an excuse to get out of that house and because I desperately needed money. The work was hard, like loading boxes all day, 10-hour shifts, but the coworkers were cool. And for the first time since all this had happened, there were people who treated me normal, who didn't look at me like I was a monster. 2 of the guys I worked with basically became my best friends. They'd ask me why I was living with my great-uncle, why I didn't have my own phone, all those things. But I didn't tell them much, because I was still processing everything, and because, frankly, I didn't know how to explain the situation without sounding crazy. As soon as I got my first paycheck, I left my great-uncle's house. My 2 coworkers needed a third roommate for an apartment they'd found, and even though the place was small and not very nice, it was 1,000 times better than continuing to live with that angry old man. We moved in together, and it was like, you're starting to breathe again, you know, like I finally had a little bit of control over my life. The months passed, and I kept working at the warehouse, saving every penny I could because in my mind, I kept thinking that someday I was going to be able to go to college, that even though they'd taken away my fund, I was going to find a way to pay for my education myself. Life wasn't easy, but it was mine. You know what I mean? Nobody was telling me what to do. Nobody was treating me like a criminal. And little by little, I started to feel like a normal person again. I changed jobs after the first year, got something better, paid at a logistics company, started taking online classes when I could afford them, basically building a life from scratch. My roommates became my family. Like my brothers, we were super close, and they never asked me too much about my past because they respected that it was clearly something painful for me. During those 3 years, sometimes I'd think about my family, my parents, how Chelsea was doing, but I never tried to contact them because, frankly, I was scared of what might happen, and also because I was so angry, so hurt by what they'd done to me, that I didn't know if I'd ever be able to forgive them. While I was in Iowa rebuilding my life literally from nothing, Chelsea was wasting the money they'd given her. My money. I found out after everything happened, but basically she didn't use the money for college like it was supposedly the plan. Instead, she went traveling for a whole year, like touring Europe and Asia, posting photos on social media from all the fancy places she visited, acting like she was an influencer or something. When she came back, she bought an apartment, kept living beyond her means, going out to expensive restaurants, buying designer clothes, all those things. She never finished her degree, never got a real job, basically lived off the money she'd stolen because that's what it was, theft. Things changed like 6 months ago. I got an email from my uncle, Chelsea's dad. It was the first time anyone from my family had tried to contact me in 3 years. The email was long and basically said that Chelsea had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, that it was advanced stage, that the doctors had given her very little time to live. At first, I didn't know how to feel about it. Part of me was angry because why were they contacting me now? What was I supposed to do with that information? But then the email continued and said that Chelsea had confessed the truth, that before dying she'd admitted that it had all been a lie, that nothing she said happened had happened. I couldn't believe it when I read that. I literally had to read the email like 5 times to process it. Chelsea had confessed that she'd falsely accused me because she was desperate for money, because she wanted my uncle and my parents to keep paying for everything, and when I told her she should work, she got so angry she decided to ruin my life to get what she wanted. She knew that if she accused me of something terrible, my parents were going to react emotionally, they were going to want to help her and punish me, and she was right. It worked perfectly. My uncle wrote that he and my parents were devastated to know the truth, that they didn't know how to ask for forgiveness, that they understood if I never wanted to talk to them again. Chelsea had had to sell her apartment and all her things to pay for medical treatments, and was living with my uncle again, basically waiting to die. I didn't respond to the email immediately because I didn't know what to say. 3 years of my life had been taken by a lie. 3 years where I lost everything. My family, my friends, my planned future. Where I had to live with fear and shame for something I never did. And now it turns out Chelsea had simply decided to confess because she was dying and I guess she felt guilty or something. That night, I told my roommates the whole story. There was the first time I really explained to them what had happened, why I'd ended up in Iowa. The whole truth. They got so angry when they heard it, like really furious on my behalf, saying my family was horrible, that Chelsea was a monster, that I should do something about it, not just let it stay like that. I thought a lot about what they said, and decided they were right, that I couldn't just let this stay as a family secret, that people needed to know the truth about what had happened. I sent a message to my parents, the first direct contact I'd had with them in 3 years, telling them I was going to post the complete story on my social media, that I was going to tell exactly what had happened, the false accusation, the exile, the confession, everything. My parents called me immediately, like hysterical, begging me not to do it, saying I was going to ruin the family's reputation, that Chelsea was already suffering enough with the cancer, that, please, would I consider the impact it would have on everyone. I told them they'd had 3 years to consider the impact their actions had on me, that it was too late to worry about reputations. I posted the whole story. I didn't hold anything back. I explained the false accusation, how my parents had exiled me without really investigating or listening to me, how they'd given my college fund to Chelsea, how she'd used that money to travel and live luxuriously instead of studying, the deathbed confession, everything. The response was overwhelming, like way more than I expected. Friends I hadn't seen in 3 years started contacting me, saying they'd always thought something was weird when I disappeared, that they'd never believed me capable of doing what Chelsea had said. Relatives who didn't know the whole story wrote to me with support, some saying they'd cut off their relationship with my parents after finding out the truth, that they were on my side. My parents sent me a message after I posted everything, saying they were disappointed in me, that I'd chosen to air family problems publicly instead of handling it privately, that they didn't understand why I wanted to cause more pain when Chelsea was already dying. I blocked them after reading that message, blocked their numbers, their emails, their social media, everything. They had no right to be disappointed in me. Not after what they did to me. Not after believing Chelsea without giving me the benefit of the doubt. Not after exiling me like I was trash. The disappointment I felt for them was 1,000 times greater than what they could feel for me. Last week, I went to my hometown for the first time since I left. My roommates came with me because they wanted to see the place where I grew up, and because they wanted to support me. We stayed with some high school friends who'd contacted me after my post, people who'd been part of my life before everything exploded. It was weird being back, seeing the streets where I grew up, the places where I used to hang out, but it was also like closing a circle, like proving to myself that I could go back and that I no longer had to hide or feel shame for something I didn't do. Some relatives invited us to eat, aunts and uncles and cousins who'd cut contact with my parents after finding out the whole truth, and it was nice to feel that support, to feel that not everyone in my family had abandoned me. I didn't see my parents during that visit, and I didn't try to. I don't know if I'll ever be ready to talk to them, or if I even want that. Chelsea died like a month ago. I found out through social media, and I didn't feel anything when I learned about it. Like no sadness or relief or anything. Just like emptiness. Part of me thinks I should feel something. But the truth is that person doesn't mean anything to me anymore. She already caused all the damage she could cause, and she can't affect me anymore. My roommates ask me sometimes if I regret posting the story, if I think it went too far, and I always tell them no, that it was the best thing I could have done. Because finally the truth is out there, and I no longer have to carry that lie by myself. I'm 21 years old now. I'm in the process of starting college finally, paying for it myself with the money I've saved working, and even though my life isn't at all what I thought it would be when I was 18, it's mine. I built it. Nobody gave it to me, and nobody can take it away. I have friends who are like brothers. I have a stable job, I have plans for the future, and I no longer live in fear that someone will discover some dark secret because there is no secret, just the truth. Sometimes I think about how things would be if Chelsea had never accused me, if my parents had believed me, if I'd gone to college as planned. But then I realize there's no point living in what could have been, because this is what happened and all I can do is move forward with the life I have now, which isn't perfect but is real and is mine.